Hi, everyone. Happy Nurses Month and happy Mental Health Awareness Month. Welcome to our May 2021 Fifth Window Spotlight. My name is Charlene Platon, CEO and co-founder of Fifth Window, and we are so excited to welcome you all here today. You may have noticed that our name has changed. Our name was formerly Wellnurse App, but we have changed our name to Fifth Window, and that represents the multifaceted dimensions of well-being. And we are on a mission to revolutionize nurses' well-being. And so we host these spotlights each month to highlight nurses and their journeys of self-care and well-being, and to also highlight the diverse profession of nursing. And so for today's spotlight, we have our co-founders on the call, and they will be able to screen any questions that you have during the spotlight. This is a live stream, so we are actively live streaming on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. So we'll be able to see any questions you might be having if you're tuning in live with us. And so feel free to drop a question or a comment, and then we'll do our best to answer your questions or respond to your comments. And so now we would like to start by introducing our co-founders. So we'll go ahead and start with Kathy.
Hi, everyone. Kathy Schaefer, registered nurse, compassion fatigue professional, and co-founder of Fifth Window.
Great. And then we'll have Jillian.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jillian. I'm a registered nurse and co-founder of Fifth Window, and thank you for joining us today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we are so excited to welcome our guest speaker here today, and that is Jeanne Spence BSN RN. And so it's just so wonderful to have Jeanne here. She comes with a wealth of experience. Jeanne is an experienced emergency room and psychiatric nurse. She co-founded the first Black women-owned behavioral home care agency in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, known as Integrative Behavioral Homecare, LLC. And in addition, Jeanne launched her clinical marketing brand, RNAdvise, LLC, to assist healthcare entrepreneurs balance their startup business and maintain self-care. Through her professional journey as a board member of Keystone First CHC Healthcare Advisory Committee, public health administrator for not-for-profit-Convoy of Hope, and serving as the lead volunteer coordinator / project coordinator for Hope for Philly 501c3, her commitment to supporting others is her life's anthem. And so thank you so much, Jeanne, for being with us today.
Thank you. I'm super excited. Thank you so much for having me in this opportunity. And congratulations to the new name, Fifth Window.
Thank you so much. Yes, we're so excited about the new name. We're so excited to have you here. And there's just so much that we would love to talk with you about. So we will go ahead and get started.
Okay.
And we just love hearing about your nursing journey. You have such a unique path to go from where you were in the clinical setting to where you are now with entrepreneurship and self-care and well-being. And it's a really interesting journey. And so could you tell us more about your transition from being an ED nurse, especially into going into in-home psychiatric nursing? I don't think a lot of people have heard about in-home psychiatric nursing, but Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So it's funny how I will always remember being in nursing school and how I was just fascinated by the psychiatric and the emergency areas. And so based off of that, as soon as I got out of nursing school, I wanted to work in the emergency room. So happened that the emergency room was in conjunction with a psychiatric crisis center in West Philly. So meaning that every time we had a patient that came into the ER, they either had to be medically cleared to go to the psych crisis, or they truly came for an emergency. And so based off of that, for some reason, while working with all my coworkers, they said, Jeanne, you just run to the psychiatric crisis. You just love to do the interventions before you even administer the Haldol and Geodon and everything else that you chemically want to be able to provide for a person that's actively schizophrenic or bipolar. And I said, I just love it. I don't know why. So working there for 7.5 years, right? I said, this is my niche. Every time you come to that point in nursing, you're like, okay, I'm tired of being on my feet. I'm tired of taking off orders. Or like, what else can I do? And so that's when I just really came into that niche and said, I love psych. I love being able to communicate with people that have anxiety, bipolar, and schizophrenia. And the first shouldn't be chemical. Let's try some motivational interviewing. Let's try to really connect with them and show them that we care and build that trust and relationship. So from then on, I just ventured out in the psych world, and I was able to work in the Department of Corrections, where I really got a hand on the behavioral health side here in Philadelphia, and started realizing that something was missing here. So the connection with people with medical diagnosis and the connection with people with psychiatric diagnosis, it seemed not to integrate. So the patients that you see, they may have diabetes, high blood pressure, but then they also are on Zoloft, Prozac. And unfortunately, due to their, behavioral background, they can't seem to manage their physical, conditions. So that's when I said, how can we kind of stop the recurrence of hospitalizations, especially with psychiatric, individuals, and meet them where they're at, give them a sense of touch in their home. So I came across this amazing program that I became the director of nursing in. And from there on, they actually had psychiatric in the home. And I said, oh my gosh, this concept is amazing. But guess what? It takes a lot of work. It takes team, it takes effort, it takes to really be able to do a lot of case management. And that's the side in nursing school you really don't learn. You learn tachycardia, bradycardia, the physiological symptoms, but just the case communication and the coordination that truly helps the individual to maintain, self-care and wellness, you don't learn. So that's when I said, this is what I want to target. So from going into the home, being able to develop a concept with the psychiatrist and psychiatric nursing and home care nurses, I was able to say, this is my niche. And from then on, that's how I ended up developing Integrative Behavioral Homecare. And that's exactly what we do. We provide in-home psychiatric services as well as medical and address the patient's needs.
That's amazing, Jeannie. Thank you so much for sharing that in your journey. There's just so many things I want to ask about. I mean, you said that so nonchalantly, like, oh yeah, I just did this and that. But I mean,
it's my passion.
Like, oh, I just did this. It was no big deal. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And
Thank you.
Yeah, it's so great. It's so funny because I'm a twin, right? And my twin sister's a psychiatric nurse. Yeah.
Okay.
And she's always been inpatient, so I never knew that there was this whole other world with in-home psychiatric care. And for you to pursue that and to see the need, because there is a huge need. And you're definitely right about the case management, because you could give people all the tools and all the resources as they transition from the hospital, to the home. But if you don't help with their care coordination, if you don't help with their case management across a continuum, how much will that really help, right? So I find that really interesting. And I also thought it was really great that you mentioned corrections, because that's not something you hear a lot about, especially with nursing and psychiatric care, and people may not consider that. Was your experience with that also, did you go to the facilities, or did you, did you help them when they were in the hospital, or how did that work?
Yes. So in this particular instance, it was a particular program that Pennsylvania was initiating, like a private or pilot study. And so it was the Department of Corrections, but was specifically to reduce recidivism and, in parole violations. So let's just say they were in, the Department of Corrections for years. However, once they get, discharged, they still need like a probation house. So it was a facility where it was about 90 to 100 males. They were able to go, in and out, assist with outpatient and inpatient appointments. But the issue was that no one was managing the behavioral health side. So they would come to this program and get a psych evaluation as well as a medical evaluation. They stay for 90 days, and we just manage their care to help them get back on their feet. So let's just say if they're, ran out of their Remron, or they need Wellbutrin, or the Wellbutrin wasn't really working and it wasn't truly managed when they was, locked in the facility. This was that time that I worked with the psychiatrist, as well as case management, worked a lot with social workers, LCSWs as well, to truly be able to titrate as well as look at the behavioral health needs. And it was more like an integrative, interdisciplinary type of team. And it worked well. The only part was ding, 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 money. So as you know, with entrepreneurship or with any business, you always have to look at the final cost. So what was the final cost that equalized, your profit versus revenue? And honestly, there was none. So that's how I was able to kind of transition to figure out all the ins and outs of my experience and try to figure out, okay, I love to help the behavioral health field, but at the same time, if I'm going to go from bedside nursing to entrepreneurship, at the end of the day, we all want to know, how can we financially be stable? And so that's how I came across with providing psychiatric in the home.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Jeannie, for explaining more about that and your journey. And I do think that, that's really unique and much needed. And when it came to your journey for entrepreneurship, how was that for you? Because I know that entrepreneurship is also something that we don't really learn in nursing school, right? In addition to the many different things you've already mentioned, business acumen, financial acumen, and entrepreneurship is still a very new concept for nurses, and it's a you're really ahead of the times there, right, with the business that you started. So, how did you even pursue that? What did you do? How did you find help, and how did you get that up and running? Yeah, let us know more about that.
Yeah, so I would say I took my concept of the nonprofit organization, and that was like a mobile resource. So between focusing on compassion, connection, and care, I was able to understand that process. So anything with a nonprofit, it's kind of similar to running a regular business. So understanding the business concept, understanding the need of the individuals. So I'm out there, I'm in the field as a nurse, but then I'm also in the field as a community health nurse. And that's where Kathy comes in. So I'm going to bring you in, Kathy. And so when me working with, my community and the center of development and just working with those resources in the city, I was able to say, you know what, let me take the same concept that I worked with a nonprofit organization and let me try to blend the two experiences. So anywhere with addressing socioeconomic terms of health, I took that platform, being able to provide housing, being able to provide clothing, groceries, being able to be that care connector for individuals that may not have the access. And I can honestly say a little bit of my background came from literally growing up in a poverty-stricken area. But that was by choice. Meaning by choice, my parents could have decided to live anywhere, but they were determined to truly say, you know what, this is our life anthem. This is the reason why we want to help someone. So taking all those resources, being a part of a nonprofit, I feel like all my life, and then saying, I want to help, right? I want to connect, but then I also want to make some money. Let's just get real. We are nurses, nurses have multiple jobs. So taking all that concept and truly being able to mimic my experiences in the corporate world. And so that's how I was able to be in the management on the corporate world. So, with management corporate, you have to understand what branding is. You have to understand what leadership manager skills. You have to know how to say, okay, nurses, let's get it together. What's priority? Let's figure out that triage. That ER came back in my mind. And let's figure out how to work together. And putting all those concepts, that's when I said, you know what? I really want to brand something. I want to brand a transition. So I said, this is my transition, becoming strategically involved with getting great results and still being financially stable. So, yeah, that's how I came about it. Nonprofit.
So, Jeannie, I want to jump in here for a second because I want to, you touched on something that is so important for nurses. I think too often nurses are really afraid to ask to be paid what they're worth. And so when they're going to do something, especially to help someone else, be through a business, through nonprofit, through home care, whatever it is. And people say, well, where are you going to get the money to start that up? Or how are you going to fund that? Nurses are like, oh, no, I'm going to donate my time. I'm going to apply for a grant. And that's not the real world. So I think you are living proof of how nurses need not only those the skills and knowledge that we have of our medical background, but we have to expand our skill set to understand business and nonprofits and care coordination if we want to truly help people to pay for those things. So I want to applaud you, even though you were my student at one time. You're like living my dream. So, that's wonderful.
Thank you. It's a challenge. I can honestly say I did a lot of stuff for free. And at the end of the day, do I still do things for free? Yes. It's the nursing in us, right? You get a part-time job, you be a per diem job, then you have a full-time job, and you're in community involvement, then you want to help this girlfriend out, you want to help this person out, and you lose sight of yourself. And I realized that I needed a balance, and my balance involved financially being stable. Let's just face it. I mean, you can't really enjoy life if you're not financially stable. And at the same time, money isn't the answer. So I had to come with some type of concept and feeling fulfilled, not only as a nurse, but as an individual. And yes, do I take some things for free? I do. But do I also have to figure out the charge, or do I have to figure out to maneuver, the cost effectiveness of my services? Do I have to be bold enough to say to the insurance companies, listen, these are the services that I offer. So yes, these are the services that I charge. I mean, it's difficulty, but I can honestly say I have a great support system, and that's key. To keep you balanced, to have an amazing, support system. My mother and my father and my daughter, they are always behind me. And so I would say that to anyone, if you want to come from corporate to entrepreneurship, you need a team. And clearly y'all have an amazing team with Fifth Window.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeannie. And you're right, it's definitely a challenge, especially when you consider the financials, but I really love what you mentioned about having a support system. That goes for so many things, right? Even with just nursing in general, you need a support system to thrive in nursing, and that definitely goes for business. And I want to talk about RNAdvise because, I think that it's great that you have that platform and you have that business, and I love the self-care aspect of it too. Can you tell us more about RNAdvise, what it's about and what you do to help nurses?
Yeah, so it's funny how this concept happened. Like I said, giving out free services, right? So one day someone called me and said, hey, I have an idea. I want to start a home care, but I want a specialty. And I was just giving out this great advice. And then my daughter, she was 11 at the time, she pretty much said, Mother, you do realize you can charge for this? I said, oh, no, I'm not charging people for my advice. Why would I do something like that? And she said, because you're always on the phone helping other people. Like you said, I was just so hesitant wanting to charge people just to give them, to me, common sense. But then my daughter, the 11-year-old, she said, Mom, you need to come up with something. So literally, this is exactly how it works. Within 3 hours, she came up with the concept RNAdvise. And with that, I was able to create be a transition specialist. So I was able to say, you know what, as a nurse, I really didn't have help. I had to kind of like go by the whim, right? I lost tons of money, I hired the HR person, or I hired this one, hired that one, not realizing like I could really do it myself if I do a YouTube link or, connect with other people. And I said, you know what, the experiences that I went through, I would want another nurse to go through. I want to be a help for someone. So based off of that, I was able to say, how can I create a clinical marketing brand, right, for nurses, not charge too much, even though I know how much nurses can make, but not charge too much, but just enough to get them started. So really emphasizing on the startup RNs who really say, hey, I worked in the ICU. I'm tired of being on my feet. How can I transition to possibly provide that private care to individuals who don't want to remain in the ICU and probably have an in-home business to be able to provide the ICU fluids and the cardiac medication? Or how can I have someone who's like a nurse who works in long-term care, for 15 years, and she really went from a CNA to LPN and now an RN, but she wants to go back to her roots. She wants to help her CNA. So I'm that person, and I have an RNAdvise connection team that's able to say, hey, this is your niche, this is what you can do, and let's say how to move forward. And I took the same concept of behavioral home care and really being able to know who your audience is. And I really developed okay, let's go from what do you want to do now? So you have a brand new now, right? Brand you and beyond, and brand you forever. So it's more like what I want to do now. Do I want to make short-term money? Do I want to be consultant? Or do I want to create this big business that can be long-lasting? Or do I want to just help people? And that's what I decided to do. I just want to help you get started, brainstorm with you, be your buddy partner. I have just like the whole concept of, train the trainer. No, especially with RNs, we can really be stubborn sometimes. and however, we could be so critically thinking and combining all our attributes, everything we learned in nursing school, and really being able to take that focus into one concept and developing it and blossoming. And so I think that's how I came with RNAdvise. And it's so funny because I'll be transparent. My website really does not explain it all on RNAdvise. So I constantly have to say, am I really doing what I'm saying I'm doing? I constantly have to recreate myself. And I tell the nurses, just because you come up with one idea doesn't mean that you have to stick with that idea. With us nurses, we're so concise. We have to make sure that, let's just say you draw that insulin and that bevel has to be perfect, or, we're so on point and accurate, right? But with the business concept, you have wiggle room. You can play around a little bit. You can enjoy. You can put that creativity in it. You can build concepts like be a better initiative concept. So anything where writing amazing notes to my team, just in handwriting, that's how I'm able to implement that self-care, because nurses, we want to feel appreciated. We want to feel loved, and we want to know that we are truly making a difference, not just at the bedside, but as a nurse to nurse. And I think that's why I love the fifth window concept so much, because it truly focuses on, okay, from a nurse perspective, if I want to talk to another nurse, how can I provide that self-care not only as a personal, but how can I provide it in my business? And it's so funny because I had posted on Kathy's the psychological week 2, and she says, make sure you do your Kegels. And I said, oh yeah, I got to do my Kegels.
Yes.
And this is real time. People want to know, like, does your information and your advice really work? And it does, And so I think that's where I came from the concept with RNAdvise.
Yeah, that's great. I was definitely doing my Kegels too after I heard Kathy say that, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. It's amazing.
I know.
And thank you for mentioning the self-care and the emphasis on that, because I do think that that's a really important part of of nursing, of business, and I'm sure, and that's something that you really emphasize. And just learning about your own journey with self-care, how do you make sure, because you're really busy, you run your business, you do all this amazing advocacy work. How do you ensure that you have your own self-care prioritized in the midst of all this amazing work that you're doing?
Yeah, so what you have to develop is coping skills, right? How can you cope under stress? How can you cope between, it's two different stresses I've realized in this world. It's the business stress, being a business, and then also it's I guess you would say it's the home business, right? And then you go to another level of stress when you're in leadership management as a nurse. So not only are you using your nursing skills and your critical thinking skills, then you have to figure out how to prioritize. And I say, I learned from one of the best teachers, which is my mother. And my mother always says, you really have to focus on you in order to focus on other people. Focus on you meaning develop a routine. Waking up in the morning. What is the coffee you love? What is the tea that you love? Making sure you're not rushing out the house, giving yourself that hour and a half. She really inspired me by walking every day. And, I'm not a person. I love to eat healthy, but let's just say me and exercise, we are not friends. But what I realized that I had to take that concept of wellness and balance and just truly meditate. And then I love music. So not too many people know that about me, but I wanted to be a musician when I grew up. So based off of that, music is my therapy. So I play the piano, I sing, I really try to incorporate that as well with my patients. So let's just say one of my patients, has a keyboard in his home. And so I said, hey, he was feeling really down and depressed. And I said, you want me to play something for you? And it was like, Miss Jeanne, you know how to play? And just in that self, you don't realize that when, as I call it ministering, because my background is Christianity. When I'm ministering to someone, I didn't realize that I'm really ministering to myself. And that gives me that time to take, an inhale and an exhale. And being able to kind of integrate what I do personally and apply it to someone else. So it's always good to have these key concepts that I go by. And let's just say, I'll be honest with you, I'm not perfect. I fall off. It can be like a week or two where I'm just running in the winds. I got sticky notes everywhere. I forget the house keys. I forget my, little certain things. But I had to always go back to the basics. Always go back to your foundation. I developed the room on my home, and that's my meditation room. So
that's awesome. Yeah. Thank you for sharing the different strategies you use for prioritizing, because I know it is really hard, right? Even if we know how much it's beneficial, it could be really hard to do that, especially if there's so much going on and all the different things that we might encounter during our day and our week. So really appreciate you sharing that with us. And what would you say? Yeah. And what would you say your biggest challenges were in terms of prioritizing your self-care now versus when you were a clinical nurse at the bedside? How would you say that those were different, and what does that look like now?
So I would say my biggest difference is time. So, with time as nurses, we do our 12-hour shifts. You do the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I think I did every shift. I'm not sure. Charlene, have you did every shift? I think I did.
I've done several.
I did three 12 hours. Sometimes I did 4 10 hours. So I did every weekend. I mean, I've been a nurse for 14 years, so imagine how many shifts I did. When you come into entrepreneurship, it's no shift. Yes, it's a 9 to 5 like business, but let's just face it. If you're a startup, you're always working, working. And with working in the bedside nursing or in the corporate world, I kind of was able to balance my shifts. Like I know that I had to clock in this time and I had to clock out at this time. And if I didn't clock out, well, I'll get overtime pay, right? So who cares? But now it's more like I have to really set like an alarm to say, ding, 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 the time is over. So it's like, even when it comes to consultation hours, you say you charge an hour, a half an hour. For some apparent reason, I always go over that hour. And to be honest with you, I'm still struggling with that. I'm still trying to figure out how to overcome that challenge. Have any suggestions?
I do. Our 5th week is professional self-care. So if you hold on, you will tell you all about that.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, we have lots of suggestions week by week. Kathy's been doing the live streams on Instagram for everyone who's listening. So just check us out on Instagram for some advice on that. But yes, it's really tough, Jeannie. Like, especially, all of us at Fifth Window, we know what the challenge has been being a startup while maintaining full-time jobs on top of our personal lives. It's a lot to balance. And then on top of the pandemic and on top of all these other things that are happening, It's quite a bit. But it does emphasize and it really underscores the need to have self-care, right? And to really include that as part of the balance because I mean, it's just a similar concept when you exercise, right? People don't think twice about the importance of physical exercise, but mental health and well-being is equally, if not more important. And it's a muscle you also have to flex and exercise every week, every day, however often you can. And it's an ongoing practice. You know, I think a lot of people may think that mental well-being is something maybe you just do like therapy or maybe you do some sessions for like a little bit and then that's enough, but it's really an ongoing practice. And you know, we talk a lot about that too at Fifth Window, but it's really tough. And I really applaud you for all the work that you're doing and still being able to prioritize, even having that awareness is a huge deal because I think that's something that we as nurses haven't even had the awareness historically. So it's a huge deal.
Yeah, it's difficult. I could say, like again, what balances me is my support system, and they help me develop a schedule. So they actually help me say, hey, ding ding ding, now time is over, or do you think you should do that? Are you getting paid, or is this a free service? You know, and I think that kind of also keeps me in line. And I guess you will also say another challenge is boundaries. Creating that boundaries from professionalism to friendship, that's difficult for me, and I've learned the hard way. I'm still learning, but I definitely think setting those boundaries, you know, initially, once you say, hey, yes, you're my friend, but then you're also my client, and I may lose them as a friend, you know, or I may lose them as a client, but I've realized I have to set those boundaries or I'm not taking care of myself. So I guess that's another challenge of mine as well. Have you guys experienced that challenge at all?
Oh yeah. Does anyone want to share? Kathy or Jillian, do any of you want to share about?
Yeah, Jillian, have you?
I mean, yes, but I guess not in the same way that you have per se. I think were you referring to like working with friends?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I haven't since I didn't know Kathy or Charlene before this.
Oh, okay.
I guess that is, you know, in a way, it is helpful. Like, you know, going into something not knowing people, you still have to develop that rapport and trust and relationship. But I think in, you know, my future career as a psych NP, that will be hugely important. You know, with my clients, developing, you know, boundaries and because that's a big part of care. And you know, as a nurse too, even developing those boundaries can be challenging when you want to go above and beyond to help people. So
yeah.
Kathy, anything you wanted to add to that too?
I think we've all experienced it in our own way of how. I think the biggest one I think that we could all relate to is when people ask us for medical advice, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that we're going to charge like your neighbor, like, oh, I'm going to charge you $50 for looking at your kid's toenail and telling you it's like an ingrown toenail. No, I think the boundaries though are people like you're at a party. What do you do? I'm a registered nurse. Oh, I have this. I'm like, listen, I'm a neurology nurse. I know nothing about that part of the body system. So don't ask me. You're like, and then you feel like there's that fine balance. You know, am I going to look like I'm not smart, that I shouldn't be a nurse because I'm not going to answer that question? But then you say, that's not my area of specialty. You know, I can help you find someone, but I think that we can all relate to that when it comes to like, how do we set boundaries?
I mean, I think there's another component of this too, is like when you're working as a nurse or whatever your role is and being able to say no, no, I can't do this overtime. And, you know, being able to be okay with that. I mean, that's something I struggle with. I always want to do everything that I possibly can for like the team of people that I'm working with, because I always want to make a good impression. I don't want people to think that I'm, you know, not willing to work hard or not, you know, invested. But I think you have to take into account your own needs. And if you are not feeling well, or if you're stressed and overworked and you're not going to be able to do as good of a job, as you normally would be able to if you were rested and taking care of yourself.
Yeah, and I think that, Jillian, to add to that too, I feel like for nurses, a lot of that could show up with even taking a sick day when you need it. Because I know when, and I'm sure all of you could relate, and I'm sure all of us have not taken a sick day when we really should have and came to work when we weren't feeling so great. And that's not always the best decision for us or the patients or our staff members or colleagues and peers. I've definitely called in to work when I was sick, and my mom's like, "Don't go into work," and I'm like, "I'm good. I could just go in." And then I go into work, and then my patients are like, "Are you okay?" Like, I don't know. Like my patient, if your patient's telling you like, "Are you okay?" That's probably not good, right?
Yeah. Or
So,
just
wow.
also not apologizing constantly.
Yes.
It's like another thing that I'm guilty of too. I constantly apologize, and I'm not quite sure why. But but you probably really don't have to. If you're doing something for yourself, you don't really have to explain that to someone else. That's for you to know the reasons behind why you're doing it and why it's benefiting you. So.
I'll ask a question. I'll ask a question to Jeanne. Jeanne, how do you balance though boundaries or create boundaries in regards to your nonprofit, I guess, asks, requests? We all want to help, right? And when we see neighborhoods that definitely need so much help, you never want to say no. Well, I'll show up. I'll do the free health screenings. Oh, I'll arrange to get the food and distribute it. But there's only so much secondary trauma that we can absorb before we finally say, I can't do that. Like, you're gonna have to find someone else to coordinate that event. So how do you balance that?
Yeah. So it took time. So I was the one that would take it all. But then I had to realize, I had to relax, relate, and release. We as nurses like to hold on to things, right? So I actually had to train someone else that could be my mini-me, and being able to do that person was able to coordinate an event that I just couldn't get to. And once that person was able to understand the job description, the task, and did exactly what I said, then that person trained the next person. So that's why I talk about it's so key to have a team. And I truly rely on a team. And I always say it's know me and team, right? Because if I say, okay, I'm going to do this, that, and then that, and I don't have nobody to be at all 5 different events, then it's just impossible because I'm not doing justice to myself, nor am I doing justice to the individuals that are asking me for my time. But I'll be upfront with them. So let's just say if someone asks me to, be at an event, I'm literally going to say, you may not see my face, but my presence will be there and my amazing team will represent our brand. So I always, even when with RNAdvise, I always make sure if that individual that I'm coaching can't get in touch with me, I always introduce them to my RNAdvise coordinator, my RNAdvise specialist, my RNAdvise intake department. And to be honest with you, do I have time to pay all these 5 departments? No, because you're like, well, financially, how can you do it? That's where your team comes in at. That's where your support system comes in and says, you know what? I trust you. I want to be there for you. I want to help you build your brand. Let me be a part of it. And really gathering those type of individuals around you so you can feel like you're doing it all.
So your brand is not only your business, your brand is who you say you are as a person. That's what I'm getting out of your thing. Okay.
Yeah. My brand is who I say as a person. Yeah. I never say I never say my business. I always say our. I always say team. And it really provides that true connection. But I make sure though, because what I don't want is to get that feeling like, oh, here goes another organization, or oh, here goes another corporate. I want it to feel individualized. I want it to feel unique. I want people to feel special. Like, once again, that's just a touch. It's very important, especially when it comes to psychiatric. You don't want someone to feel like, oh, you just brushing them off. Like, oh, okay. And that's with everything. That's with the nonprofit and that's with profit.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Jeannie. And there's so much great work that you're doing, with RNAdvise, with the work with your advocacy. Where do you actually see yourself in 10 years? What's your big plans for the future?
So I definitely want to go back to school, but I had to
Oh,
put family in priority. Yes, I definitely want to go back to school. Definitely pursuing to be a psych NP. So congratulations to you, Jillian. I'm so happy for you. So that's definitely where I see myself in the next 10 years. And then still being able to maintain, the brand. Because once again, I guess you would say COVID-19 clearly affected a lot of small businesses. And what I did realize, though, that the behavioral home care business truly wasn't affected. I mean, it was affected to a certain extent, but you really want to create a brand that's long lasting. But then you also want to create your own brand. You could be a co-founder to this and be a co-founder in that, but you really want to invest in yourself and be your own founder. And I think that's where the spark came from me in saying, okay, how can I develop my own concept for that to be long lasting? And for me to still feel like I'm making a difference as well as having that financial stability. So within 10 years, I want to be able to combine all my brands and consider it like a one-stop shop. And so saying that, okay, I have this amazing concept, and a poverty-stricken, uninsured, because I'm at the same time, I love community health, neighborhood, and you say it's an all-in-one. So being able to provide that wellness, that behavioral, getting those resources for housing, getting those resources for groceries, and just really being able to say, okay, I need someone that's homeless and, and I can't take them to the local, site crisis because all they're going to do is just treat them and street them. Unfortunately, that's the terminology, we're used to, So where do they go after that, And so that's the concept I'm looking to develop, to figure out where do people go after the hospital.
Yeah, that's great. And I used to work with that population of patients, homeless individuals who were in the hospital, and then they would be discharged back to the community. And I
Okay.
worked for a nonprofit that had a respite care center where we would actually, work with the homeless patients that were discharged from the hospital, bring them to a respite care center, set them up with their social services, medical services, so
Nice.
they could attend their follow-up appointments, help connect them with family members, help connect them with jobs, and find interviews and different resources. And it was a really powerful program, and we definitely don't
Wow.
have enough of those. So if you're working on that, I mean, I could just tell you firsthand, that is
Oh,
amazing, much needed,
okay.
and we are far from having enough of those resources. So I really commend you on that. I think that's an amazing journey to take.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Like I said, I think the hardest part is billing and
Yes.
making money from that. Yeah. So we're working on it. I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. And I was also wanted to touch upon the pandemic too, and you mentioned it a little bit, and how I know you mentioned it hasn't impacted maybe your business as much as it might have impacted other businesses during this time, but how have you seen the pandemic change your business and what you're doing, or what did you have to do maybe to pivot in terms of your business?
Yeah. So with, any business, you need staff, right? So I start with staff retention. So if people have COVID, they can't work. That's just the basic concept. So with the home care, you need a lot of staff. You need a lot of people on your team to be able to provide this care. And specifically with our specialty, you really need individuals that are trained as mental health trained specialists to be able to engage and to focus. Well, if they're sick and they're traumatized, so now you're dealing with staff that is traumatized and sick, then there's nobody to meet the need. If nobody's there to meet the need, then you have to shift your patients to another agency. And I think when it comes to that concept, once again, we were sustainable, but the numbers went down, just like everybody else's numbers. The referrals went out the door, just like everybody else's referrals. So being able to shift and pivot and to kind of figure out, okay, what's the next plan? What's the next step? No, we didn't necessarily fall, but we want to be sustainable. And then also I wanted to kind of just create my own niche. I wanted to figure out, okay, if the business that, I was assisting was, sustainable, but what about the other nurses who lost their jobs? Let's just face it, or what about the other nurses that had to be put on furlough or layoff? Because a lot of the, outpatient appointment clinics, they were closing down. They weren't taking selective surgeries. And so what about those nurses? The OR nurses who've been an OR nurse for 25 years. Now what? I was really reaching for those nurses that was looking to create their own platform. And that's kind of how RNAdvise came about, because if I know how to do this for myself, what are the rest of the nurses that's out there that need to do it for themselves, And I was blessed to have that opportunity to kind of understand that business concept. And I said, you know what, let me take it into the clinical spectrum and to help others like me. So it's like I'm walking the process while teaching and learning. So yeah, it's one of those.
Yeah, that's great. And I love how you considered that and the journey of the nurses during the pandemic. And I know that there were, it's crazy to think about, but I know that there were nurses who were furloughed during the pandemic, who did lose their jobs. And the surgeries was part of it too. A lot of the cases were, on the decline, or just had to be stopped altogether. So that was a really big blow for some of the healthcare systems. And so, yeah, that's why we really appreciate what you're doing in terms of helping nurses find their path, find their niche, find their journeys. And I think that's so important. And I think with entrepreneurship and nursing businesses that are starting to only increase now, especially during the pandemic, there's so much more nursing focused businesses that have come up, and healthcare businesses in general. I think that's just so important, and really gives nurses this other lens of, hey, there's actually so much more you could do with your expertise that you might not realize. So I think it's great that you're helping them see that potential. And
thank you.
yeah. And I wanted to ask too, in terms of yourself, what really brings you joy? I think you've talked about that too with just the different work that you're doing, but what really brings you joy? What really helps you, get up and do this great work for your business every day? Because that could be really hard.
Yeah, I would say what gives me joy is seeing other people's success. And I know they say, well, how does that give you joy? I don't know. It does. And because there's a distinction between joy and happiness. You say peace, joy, happiness, and I just really like seeing someone smile on their face. So for instance, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, one of my clients, she was trying to call me, but we're working, so I couldn't answer the phone right away. But I said, send me a text message, right? And so instead of her sending me a text message, she sent me like a voice message. And I just was having a hard day at work. I mean, it's just one of those days. You're just trying to do both things at the same time. And she said, oh my goodness, Jeanne, you won't believe it. I got approved. I was able to get my curriculum together, for my CNA school. And I was able to do this amazing presentation for the nursing home. And they said yes. And just hearing that was like, wow. Like, I couldn't necessarily be there with her, but prepping her, really sitting there side by side and giving her the advice, and to actually see that my advice actually worked, that brought me joy, and then just being able to say to my nurses, hey, get your chin up. Yes, maybe somebody did, cuss you out. That's what participants and patients do, but look at you on the inside, and being able to see somebody smile and then in return show me that appreciation. And that truly gives me joy. And then once again, me being, a strong believer in Christ, joy comes within. Joy comes even when you're sad. Joy comes even when you're a single mom and you may be going through a difficult divorce, or, you just trying to help your friend who may got, in a domestic violence, situation. And still being able to present that joy, present that faith, but then also, let's just say, being real, being transparent, and giving that testimony. And out of that testimony, out of that sense of relief, out of that sense of sharing, your journey, I smile. And that gives me joy just to know I made some type of impact in someone else's life. And to say, hey, we messed up. Yes, we make mistakes. I wanted to graduate, and have my master's in MP by now. I feel embarrassed, And talking to Kathy says, don't give up, and having her as that major support system. Like, no, did you do this, and that, and that? So also, like, having that accountability, and it says, you know what? Yeah, I need to get back on it, because why? That was a part of me that gives me joy, self-satisfaction, embracing yourself, empowering yourself. Because if you don't focus on yourself, then you can't give joy. That's not just gonna, just pop out at you, So yeah.
That's great. I love the emphasis on, finding the joy within, because I think a lot of people seek joy externally, right? A lot of people might find joy in a lot of the things that we weren't able to do during the pandemic, And I think that was a really difficult transition, because all the things that brought me joy were a lot of those external things, traveling, going to the gym, seeing my friends, but a lot of those things we're not really internally focused. So then finally having the pandemic and then having that time to reflect and do a lot of this internal self-care journey is huge. And I think that it really makes a difference. And I wholeheartedly agree with what you mentioned about that, because if you can't see the joy within yourself, then it's really hard to continue to be on that path and to continue to understand why you're on that path. So I think that's a really, really important point to emphasize. And I can't believe we're already almost at the end of the hour. And I feel like there's just so much more that we could talk with you about. And one other question that we had was, what else would you like to share with our listeners and nurses in general when it comes to their self-care?
Okay. So I would say, as already mentioned, self-care truly focuses on you. So continuing to maintain that balance, to integrate your core values. So for instance, my core values is integrity. My core values is remaining focused with my morals, being able to consistently be reliable, not only for my friends, but for my family, and to bring all what I've learned, all my experiences, all my 14 to 15 years, and truly combining that and to say, what lessons have I learned? And I can honestly say, I've made mistakes. And my mom always told me, yes, you can make mistakes, but that's not your stopping point, and you have to still live through your mistakes. Your mistakes is not going to name who you are. And I'm a perfectionist. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, it has to be perfect. My hair has to be this way. I gotta make sure I have my lip gloss. That's normal. Am I too fat? Am I too skinny? Like, what is it? And just really being able to say, what is your beauty within? What are you doing to make sure you're healthy? And everything, like I said, if you do within, it would exemplify the strategic results that you want for your own business. And I always say, as a nurse, when you want to start off as a business, there's always those pain points. Pain points is what? Just trying to figure out, okay, am I going to be a 501(c)(3)? Do I want to be a nonprofit? Do I want to be an LLC? And trying to navigate and maneuver the system when it comes to legislative laws, when it comes to employment, right? And it comes to every business aspect. But once again, if you remain at your core values, if your core values is, I don't want to do this to make money, I really don't want to do this for financial wealth. Some people are just like that. Then stick to it. That is who you are. Being focused and not being scattered. And I think one of the downfalls with a whole bunch of entrepreneurship is that you may not have the accountability. Well, you need to find it because that's what defines you. And I think that is my main concept with continue on as a nurse entrepreneur.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jeannie, for sharing that. I think that those are really insightful words of wisdom to share with nurses who are interested in pursuing entrepreneurship or just in general throughout their careers. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh, thank
And
you.
yeah, and I can't believe we're already at the end of the hour, but could you let listeners and nurses know where they could find you?
Yes, you can find me on IG. It's my name, Jeannie_Spence. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm Jeanne Spence. And then you also can find me on my website at www.RNAdvise.com. And I'm so grateful for this opportunity. I'm looking forward to continue working with Fifth Window.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jeannie. And thank you for joining us. We had such a great conversation with you today. There were so many tokens and nuggets that we got from you today. So thank you. We really appreciate that. And so for everyone who's listening, thank you for joining us as well. Fifth Window, if you haven't heard, the month of May is really exciting because we launched our open beta test. So from May 6th up until May 31st, we have our open beta test ready for nurses and healthcare professionals to try out if you're interested in what we're doing. And if you would like to join, there's still time. We're offering it until the end of the month. So you could visit our website at fifthwindow.com, www.fifthwindow.com, and you could click join beta test and try our app. We're offering it on the iPhone and on the Android as well. So also feel free to join us on social media. You can see our link tree here, linktree.com/fifthwindow to learn about, just to keep up with us and learn about the different things that we're doing. So thank you so much. And does anyone else have any other things to mention?
Oh, don't forget to join us in our 5-week self-care challenge. We'll be entering week 3 next week, where we're going to be focusing on emotional self-care. And I would just like to say one little personal thing. Jeannie mentioned, you get joy in seeing other people achieve what they can. And I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. I was Jeannie's clinical instructor in a former life a long time ago. And there's nothing that brings me more joy. And a tear is coming to my eyes, Jeannie. There's nothing brings me more joy than to see a student who is so successful, so passionate about nursing, so passionate about life and the world and taking care of others and themselves, that you are truly an inspiration to me. So all the best to you.
I'm embarrassed. Thank you.
I second Kathy. You're such an inspiration, Jeannie, and I think that you've really inspired a lot of nurses and listeners today. So really appreciate you being here with us. I hope that nurses continue to reach out and communicate with you, because you're doing some amazing work. So thank you, and we'll have this recording available right after this live stream is done. So all of you could continue to listen in. And Jillian, any other comments you wanted to make as well?
I was just going to say thank you for joining us, Jeannie. It's been wonderful to hear about your journey from the start to where you are now, and your words of wisdom. I think those are very powerful for other nurses to be able to hear your positivity, because like we talked about, it is easy to kind of get down, especially during this year where it's been extra difficult. So hearing someone that is so positive and willing to kind of push through any, like you mentioned, any kind of mistakes or, downfalls or whatever you've encountered along the way is really important for others to hear.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies.
We hope to have you back in a future session, and thank you so much again. And so we really appreciate your time, and thank you to everyone who's listening. You were just listening in on our Fifth Window Spotlight, and we have these every month, so stay tuned for the upcoming guests that we have. It's going to be great. So thank you, everyone, once again. If you'd like to listen to more, or if you'd like to tune in to what we're doing, just visit fifthwindow.com, and we will see you all next time. So thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.